My goodness, folks, if this investigation, which on its face looks bogus, wasn't happening, we'd be voting to send Mr. Warsh out of committee next week or the week after, and he'd be seated by the 15th. And that's still possible if we just get past this bogus investigation.
This morning.
That's Republican member of the Senate Banking Committee, Senator Thom Tillis, reaffirming his vow to block President Trump's pick for the next chair of the Federal Reserve as long as the Justice Department continues its criminal probe into the current Fed chair, Jerome Powell, over renovations to the Fed's headquarters. That nominee, Kevin Warsh, appeared before the Banking Committee yesterday, where he was pressed on everything from monetary policy to his ties to the president and even the 2020 election.
So independence takes courage. Let's check out your independence and your courage. We'll start easy. Mr. Warsh, did Donald Trump lose the 2020 election?
We try to keep politics, if I'm confirmed, out of the Federal
I'm just
Reserve.
asking you a factual question. I need to know, I need to measure your independence and your courage.
Senator, I believe that this body certified that election many years ago.
That's not the question I'm asking. I'm asking, did Donald Trump lose in 2020?
And I'm suggesting you in 2020, the Fed made a huge inflation problem, and you certified the election.
So let me ask you another question.
Out of monetary policy.
In our meeting, you said
you
would be independent because you're, quote, a tough guy. Those were your words, tough guy. And you will be able to stand up to President Trump. So let's try it again. Name one aspect of President Trump's economic agenda with which you disagree.
Well, Senator, the Federal Reserve in recent years has wandered outside of its remit, wandered into other areas.
I'm asking for something
That's not something I'm prepared to do.
Trump on.
If I'm confirmed, the Federal Reserve should stay in its lane.
Just one little place where you disagree with Donald Trump.
Well, I do have a disagreement, actually, Senator, with the president. I think even this morning he said that he thought I was out of central casting. I think central casting, I'd look older, grayer, and maybe show up here with a cigar of sorts.
Quite adorable. But, you know, we need a Fed chair who is independent. That's the only way we preserve the independence of the Federal Reserve. If you can't answer these questions, you don't have the courage and you don't have the independence.
Yeah, I mean, if you cannot answer a question that you could take judicial notice of in any courtroom in America, except for maybe Eileen Cannon's, then you don't have the courage to stand up to the president when he needs to be stood up to so we don't have inflation exploding again. I mean, 63 federal courts said that Joe Biden won the election. Donald Trump's lawyers did not win a single hearing in front of any of those federal courts. And you have somebody 6 years later that can't say that Joe Biden got elected president of the United States and Donald Trump lost then? I mean, even Alito and Thomas on the Supreme Court said when a Pennsylvania case went up, hey, the outcome of this particular case wouldn't make a difference because Biden won by the extent that he won by. But a Fed chair can't even say that in 20. That's sad. That is really sad. It's really pathetic. Catherine Rampell, whose newsletter writes a great newsletter, Receipt, said that, first of all, that this nominee is actually has a very good background, but for the fact that he was kowtowing to Donald Trump and seemed to be scared of his own shadow yesterday, would quite possibly make a very effective Fed chair. But she said he failed on three major parts. Number one, whether Donald Trump's investigation into Jerome Powell was appropriate, refused to answer that. Number two, how would he respond if Donald Trump threatened him with retribution because he had disagreed with his monetary policy? Again, monetary policy to keep inflation down for working Americans. And then number three, of course, was Joe Biden elected president. He could not answer that question. And then gave a cutesy little glib answer on the one thing that he disagreed with Donald Trump on, with some self-deferential attempts at humor. Let's bring in right now the former host of Hardball, Chris Matthews, also former U.S. State Department appointee during Donald Trump's first term, now an MS Now political analyst, Matt Bartlett, and president of the progressive opinion research firm Impact Research, Molly Murphy. Chris, there's so much to start with here.
Yeah.
We were going to talk about the AP poll, but I've just got to go back to this and just I wonder these people that are nominated to work for Donald Trump. I mean, they got to know if they're going to be scared of their shadow going in, then they're going to be humiliated going out. This has played itself out time and time again. I have given counsel before to people through the years that were going to go work for Donald Trump and they say, Joe, you know him. Like, what do you do? I said, you can't suck up to him. If you're going to do this job, you've got to let him know you're going to tell him the truth. And if he doesn't hire you, that's fine. If he hires you, go in and do the best job you can do. But dancing around like this on whether Joe Biden was elected in 2020, this guy makes a clown of himself before the first vote's even cast for him.
You have to wonder about the motive because he's already been nominated. Trump's in the bag for this guy. It's done. The deal's done. He's going to be the Fed chairman. And the question is, why does he lie? Why does he stand up there and say something that he knows isn't true? The evidence is that Joe Biden won that election. It's clear. The former president should have said, I concede. That's been in the American tradition going back to Adlai Stevenson way back. The loser goes before the TV cameras when we had TV cameras and said, I lost. And that's how the American losers know they lost the election, because their guy told them that. And Trump has lied in this case over and over and over again, keeps doing it. And therefore, he's teaching his puppets how to lie as well. They're doing it because he's doing it. By the way, Joe, that thing you talked about, the polling, I thought the most interesting poll number in there was the 76% of independents, 76% who are against Trump right now. That is, to me, the Ross Perot's, the real independents, the cranky people out there who don't want to join political parties. They don't want to be part of anything. And those people are saying, wait a minute, I don't like this war. I don't like this guy taking us to war. I don't like Bibi Netanyahu in the Situation Room. I don't like any of this stuff going on right now. We are anti-neocon. Remember, we are anti-neocon. What happened to us? That's why we're here. And Tucker and Megyn, all the rest of them, they were very much, and Tulsi Gabbard, they were all true blue Trumpies. And now true blue Trumpies are not on base anymore. It's a real problem, and I think the guy's going to get killed this election. I think it's 30 seats. I think what we saw in Virginia last night, after the huge amount of spending, you couldn't turn on Meet the Press or Face the Nation or any of the political shows and not see again and again Barack Obama coming out against redistricting. You think he was against this bill? Well, he was for this bill. Yeah. He was advocating it, and he won.
Right. Well, I want to just say briefly about concession speeches. Yeah. I think Al Gore, what Al Gore did in 2000, when he knew that he got the most votes, except for the hanging chads and all the misvotes and the confusing ballots in Palm Beach County and across South Florida, he knew that his challenge was blocked by 5 Republican nominees who voted to elect George W. Bush president. He knew that if anybody ever had a claim, that he had a claim. But he also knew that we are Americans and that we put democracy above selfish interests. And it was an extraordinarily virtuous moment by Al Gore to do that. It hurt like hell, I'm sure. I'm sure it still hurts like hell. But I will tell you, 100 years from now, American children will be learning about what Donald Trump did in 2020, what Donald Trump did in 2020, and then go back 20 years before to see the way Americans do it, the way Americans that love this great republic do it. And there will be a picture of Al Gore.